It's great to be with folk. Welcome to this first Sunday in the Advent of Revolution series, kicking off 9 weeks of services from Thanksgiving to MLK Day, what we call the Winter Offensive. And this Advent of Revolution sounds kind of inspiring, but the times feel desperate. Advent is a season of hope, of promise, and yet this is a moment of conflict and death in the here and now. How are we to make sense of this contradiction? We hear it even in this passage from Zephaniah. Their wealth shall be plundered and their houses laid waste. Though they build houses, they shall not inhabit them. Though they plant vineyards, they shall not drink wine from them. Now, I have to say, I actually really love the prophet Zephaniah. I think he's kind of awesome. He's one of the Hebrew prophets who's writing when the king Josiah is ruling Judea. Josiah comes in after a great movement of reform because there's been such kind of terror and abuses taking place. And so we know that Zephaniah has lived through all of these kinds of abuses. It's scenes like political leaders declaring war but calling it peace. It's images of faith leaders serving as priests of empire rather than chaplains of a movement. And even though this is from long ago, I really believe much of this passage translates. I'm thinking about the kind of parking lots after parking lots after parking lots of unsold cars and unsold refrigerators, product after product that have been overproduced. But still there are millions, actually billions in this world unable to afford these necessities. It reminds me of this riddle of the coal miner. Maybe you've heard it. There's a daughter who's talking to her father, who's a coal miner. She says, "Daddy, why is it so cold in our house?" Her father answers, "Because we've run out of coal." The daughter says, "Well, why have we run out of coal?" And her father says, "We don't have any money to buy more." She says, "Well, why don't we have money?" And her father says, "Because I lost my job in the coal mine." And she says, "Well, why did you lose your job?" And he replies, "Because there is too much coal." I think this is kind of what's going on in Zephaniah. It also is what's going on when we have these apartments in New York City, where I live, called on Billionaires Row. They sit empty because their owners can make more money speculating over them. When we have, tens and tens of thousands of people in New York who are without housing. This also kind of reminds me, though, of part of Zephaniah, right? He says, "Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to save them from the day of the Lord's wrath." So this to me sounds a lot like another book of the Bible. Perhaps you've read the book of Revelation. And talking about Revelation, it does seem like we're living in end times. Now, I want to say this is not the kind of end times that the anti-Semitic yet pro-Zionist Christian nationalists, who often will put out that they believe that the Holocaust had to happen, but the state of Israel must be pushing everyone else off of the land of Palestine because they have to be ready for the second coming of Christ. Now, that isn't what the end days in Revelation are about. The end days in Revelation are about a time, a season when fires are raging across society. Fires for the poor, for the homeless, for those without health care, for those living in occupied territories, for kids who are being bombed as we speak. And this is the time. This is the time when we hear about this kind of desperation, this violence. But we also hear about this day of judgment, a judgment by something more powerful than us, who cannot stand the abuse and the suffering of God's people. A God who like we heard in that season statement about the winter offensive, speaks to Mary when she's pregnant with Jesus, and she sings a song of pulling the rich from their thrones and sending them away empty, but lifting up the lowly and filling the poor with good things. This is the contradiction that we're living in. This is the season that we're living in. And what we know is that because of constant struggle and constant tireless work, just like we heard from Dr. King, just like we heard from Ella Baker in that beautiful song, we know that we are a people who will see a time when we can have peace and prosperity for all. But we don't have hope that ignores the hard times around us. It's a hope is in that morning, a hope that is in those hard times, a hope that comes out of a place of hopelessness, but that keeps us going on so that we can kind of build the movement that God desires, and that our people need. So welcome to this season. It is a contradictory one, and I'm glad to be in it with you all.